The Silent Vanguard. The Krell warships filled the viewing screens of Arcturus Station, their obsidian hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Commander Elena Reyes watched with a growing sense of dread as the alien armada positioned itself around the colony world. Arcturus was humanity's most distant outpost, home to 7 million civilians who had no idea they were about to become the next casualties in the Krell Dominion's relentless expansion. "Status report," Elena demanded, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Lieutenant Kissim looked up from his console, face pale. 57 Krell vessels detected, Commander. 3 dreadnoughts, 22 cruisers, and the rest are attack frigates. They're deploying in standard Krell assault formation. The war had been raging for 18 months. In that time, humanity had lost 3 colony worlds and countless ships. The Krell, with their superior technology and overwhelming numbers, simply couldn't be matched in conventional combat. Their chitinous exoskeletons and insectoid features belied an intelligence that had mastered interstellar travel centuries before humans had even reached their own moon. "What's our defensive capability?" Elena asked, already knowing the answer. 7 planetary defense platforms, 3 frigates, and the station's weapon systems. Captain Valentina Chen replied from her position at Tactical. "We can hold them for maybe 20 minutes before our shields fail." 20 minutes to evacuate 7 million people was impossible. Elena closed her eyes briefly, centering herself before making the hardest decision of her career. "Initiate emergency protocol Delta 9. Begin civilian evacuation to the underground shelters. And send the signal." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone knew what Delta 9 meant. A sacrificial stand to buy time. What they didn't know was what the signal referred to. While Valentina began coordinating the evacuation, Elena moved to a secure terminal and entered a series of commands. A small quantum transmitter, independent of the station's regular communications array, activated with a soft hum. The message was simple, 3 words in an encrypted format. "Nemesis is coming." 10 light-years away, in a hidden facility constructed inside an asteroid belt, Admiral Jackson Way received the transmission. His weathered face showed no emotion as he turned to the gathered officials and scientists. "It's time," he said quietly. "Arcturus is under attack." A murmur passed through the assembled group. Dr. Sofia Novak, lead designer of Project Nemesis, stepped forward. "The ship isn't ready," she protested. "The probability drive still has fluctuations in the power matrix. We need another month at least." Wei shook his head. "We don't have another month. We don't even have another day. Arcturus has 7 million civilians. If we don't act now, they die." He turned to the massive viewing window, beyond which floated humanity's last hope. The ship didn't look impressive at first glance. A sleek, gunmetal gray vessel roughly the size of a heavy cruiser. No external weapons were visible on its hull, no massive engine arrays or gun turrets. It appeared almost delicate compared to the bulky military vessels humanity typically deployed. "Is Captain Okafor ready?" Wei asked. Dr. Novak nodded reluctantly. "Yes. The neural interface is fully calibrated to her brainwave patterns. If anyone can pilot Nemesis in its current state, it's her." Wei opened a channel to the ship. "Captain Okafor, you're cleared for immediate deployment. Arcturus Station is under Krell attack. You know what's at stake." Inside Nemesis's command center, Captain Liana Okafor sat alone in a circular chamber. Unlike traditional bridges with multiple stations and crew members, Nemesis required only one pilot. Liana was connected to the ship through a neural interface that wrapped around her temples and the base of her skull, allowing her to control the vessel's systems with thought alone. "Understood, Admiral," she replied. "Nemesis is launching now." As the ship detached from its docking clamps, Liana felt the familiar rush as her consciousness expanded to encompass the entire vessel. Nemesis wasn't just a ship, it was an extension of herself. The revolutionary technology that powered it, A combination of quantum probability manipulation and dark energy harnessing was beyond the understanding of all but a handful of Earth's greatest minds. Activating probability drive, Lyanna announced, though no one could hear her in the isolated command chamber. The ship vibrated slightly as its unique propulsion system engaged. Conventional physics dictated that faster-than-light travel was impossible. The Krell had circumvented this limitation with massive warp engines that bent space-time, but even their fastest vessels required days to travel between star systems. Nemesis did something different. The probability drive didn't move through space. It altered the probability of the ship's position in the universe. In essence, it made it more likely that the ship was already at its destination than at its origin point. The universe, forced to resolve this quantum paradox, adjusted reality accordingly. In the observation room, Admiral Wei watched as Nemesis seemed to blur slightly before disappearing entirely. "How long until it reaches Arcturus?" asked one of the officials. Dr. Novik checked her instruments. 3 minutes, 17 seconds. The official blinked in surprise. "That's impossible. Arcturus is 10 light years away." "Impossible is what we're counting on," Wei replied grimly. At Arcturus Station, the battle had already begun. The Krell opened fire with their energy lances, purple-hued beams that sliced through space toward the human defenses. The planetary platforms responded with railgun fire and missile salvos, but against the Krell shields, they might as well have been throwing rocks. Alina watched as the first defense platform exploded, its debris scattering across the upper atmosphere of the colony world. The station shuddered as a glancing hit from a Krell cruiser impacted their shields. "Shields at 62%, Kissin reported. 2 of our frigates are reporting critical damage." "Continue evacuation procedures," Alina ordered. "All non-essential personnel to the escape pods. Target the closest Krell vessels and concentrate fire." She knew it was hopeless, but every second they bought meant more civilians reaching the underground shelters. The Krell didn't typically bombard planets into oblivion. They preferred to preserve infrastructure for their own use, but their ground forces were merciless in dealing with resistance. The station rocked again as another hit landed. Warning klaxons blared across the command deck. "Shields at 40%. Kasim shouted over the noise. Multiple hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Just as Elena was about to order the remaining bridge crew to evacuate, Lieutenant Park, at the sensor station, straightened in his chair. "Commander, I'm detecting an anomaly. Some sort of quantum fluctuation directly behind the Krell fleet." Elena moved to his station, watching as the sensor readings spiked chaotically. "What is that?" "I don't know, but it's..." Park's explanation was cut short as a new ship materialized on their screens. It appeared without warning. No warp signature, no hyperspace window, no indication of conventional FTL travel. One moment empty space, the next a sleek vessel hovering directly in the midst of the Krell formation. The battlefield went silent. For several seconds, both human and Krell forces seemed frozen in confusion. The new arrival was clearly of human design, but its sudden appearance and positioning were impossible according to known physics. "Identify that ship," Alina demanded, hope rising unbidden in her chest. Park worked his console frantically. No transponder signal. Configuration unknown. But it's broadcasting on a secure UEF channel. Call sign Nemesis. Alina's eyes widened. The rumors were true. Earth's secret weapon was real, and it had arrived at Arcturus. Aboard the Krell Command Dreadnought, Supreme Commander Vexar stared at the unexpected human vessel with his 4 eyes narrowed in suspicion. "How did it penetrate our formation without detection?" he demanded, mandibles clicking in agitation. His tactical officer, a lower-cased Krell with duller carapace coloration, hurried to analyze the readings. "Unknown, Supreme Commander." There was a localized quantum disturbance, but no conventional propulsion signature. Vexar studied the human ship. It was smaller than his dreadnought, with a smooth hull that lacked the obvious weapon emplacements that typically bristled from human military vessels. Was this some sort of diplomatic vessel? A foolish attempt at parley? "Scan it thoroughly," he ordered. "Then destroy it. Continue the assault on the human station." Inside Nemesis, Liana Okafor observed the Krell reaction through the ship's sensors, which fed information directly into her mind through the neural interface. She could perceive electromagnetic emissions, gravitational fluctuations, and even the minute changes in quantum states around her. The Krell were scanning Nemesis, their primitive probes bouncing harmlessly off the ship's quantum field. "Time to introduce ourselves," Liana thought, and the ship responded. Without warning, Nemesis emitted a focused burst of energy, unlike anything seen in combat before. It wasn't a laser or a particle beam, or even a plasma weapon. Instead, it was a concentrated stream of altered probability, what the scientists back on Earth called a causality lance. The beam struck the nearest Krell cruiser, and physics itself seemed to rebel. The ship didn't explode or disintegrate. Instead, its structural integrity suddenly became highly improbable. Metal that had a 99% chance of maintaining molecular bonds now had only a 0.1% chance. The entire vessel simply fell apart, disassembling into its component materials as if it had never been constructed in the first place. At Arcturus Station, the bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the Krell cruiser dissolved before their eyes. "What did we just witness?" Valentina whispered. Elena had no answer, but as Nemesis began to move through the Krell formation, firing its incomprehensible weapon with surgical precision, she knew that for the first time since the war began, humanity had hope. The battle for Arcturus had just changed completely, and the galaxy would never be the same. Defiance unleashed. Supreme Commander Vexar had never known fear. The emotion was considered a weakness among the Krell, a vestigial response purged from the higher castes through selective breeding and neural modification. Yet as he watched his fleet disintegrate around him, Vexar felt something uncomfortably close to it crawling beneath his exoskeleton. "Target the human vessel with all available weapons," he commanded, his voice rising to a pitch that made subordinates flinch. The Dreadnought's primary energy lances powered up, gathering enough energy to vaporize a small moon. The weapons discharge, brilliant purple beams converging on the human ship, only to pass harmlessly through the space it had occupied milliseconds before. "It's predicting our targeting solutions," the tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking in agitation. "The vessel moves before our weapons fire." Another Krell cruiser dissolved into its component particles as Nemesis's causality lance struck it. 7 Krell ships had already been neutralized, and the human vessel remained untouched. Vexar's compound eyes narrowed. "Launch all fighter squadrons. Surround it. It cannot evade hundreds of separate attack vectors simultaneously." Across the battlefield, the remaining human defenders at Arcturus Station watched in awe as the mysterious vessel danced through the Krell formation. Commander Elena Reyes had ordered all available sensors focused on Nemesis, trying to understand exactly what they were witnessing. "The ship's movement patterns are impossible," Lieutenant Park reported. "It's changing position faster than our sensors can track, but without any detectable propulsion signature." "And those weapons," Valentina added, "they're not destroying the Krell ships. They're unmaking them." Elena had studied every piece of classified intelligence on Krell technology available to someone of her rank. Their ships utilized quantum-reinforced hulls capable of withstanding tremendous energy impacts. Yet this human vessel was bypassing those defenses entirely, as if rewriting the fundamental rules of reality. "Open a channel to Nemesis," Elena ordered. "Let's find out who our savior is." Inside Nemesis's neural command chamber, Liana Okafor registered the incoming communication request from Arcturus Station. While maintaining her focus on the battle, directing the ship's defensive probability field to ensure no Krell weapons found their target, she allowed the channel to open. "This is Commander Elena Reyes of Arcturus Station. Identify yourself and your capabilities." Liana smiled slightly, though no one could see it. Captain Lyanna Okafor, UEF Nemesis. We're a prototype vessel deployed to assist. Continue your evacuation procedures, Commander. We'll keep the Krell occupied. Even as she spoke, Lyanna perceived the launch of hundreds of Krell fighters through Nemesis' sensors. The small dart-like vessels swarmed from their carrier ships, forming a three-dimensional attack sphere around Nemesis. They're trying to overwhelm our predictive systems, Lyanna thought to herself. It was a sound strategy. With so many attackers, each capable of changing course independently, even probability calculations had limitations. Lyanna focused her mind, deepening her connection with the ship. The neural interface hummed against her skull as she activated Nemesis' secondary defense system. Initiating probability cascade, she announced, both to the ship's systems and to Commander Reyes, who was still on the open channel. Around Nemesis, space itself seemed to ripple. The probability field that normally surrounded the ship in a tight envelope suddenly expanded outward in concentric waves. As each wave passed through a Krell fighter, probability shifted. Components that had a high probability of functioning correctly suddenly became highly likely to fail. Guidance systems misaligned. Fuel mixtures became unstable. Weapon triggers jammed. 217 Krell fighters simultaneously experienced catastrophic system failures. Some exploded. Others spun out of control. Many simply shut down, drifting lifelessly through space. On Arcturus Station, the bridge crew watched in stunned silence. "That's not possible," Valentina whispered. "No EMP, no energy weapon discharge, no projectiles. How did it affect all those ships simultaneously?" Elena had no answer, but she was beginning to understand why this ship had been kept secret from even high-ranking military personnel like herself. Nemesis wasn't just a new weapon. It represented a fundamental shift in warfare itself. "Captain Okafor," she said into the open channel, "the civilian evacuation is at 37%. We need at least 20 more minutes to get the remaining population to the shelters." "Understood, Commander," came Lyanna's calm reply. "You'll have your time." With that, Nemesis accelerated toward the heart of the Krell fleet, directly at Supreme Commander Vexar's Dreadnought. Vexar watched the approach with growing concern. His fighter squadrons had been neutralized, half his cruisers were gone, and now this impossible human vessel was targeting his command ship. "Activate the quantum fold drive," he ordered sharply. "We will retreat and report this technology to the Dominion." "Supreme Commander," his second protested, "retreating before human forces would be unprecedented. The High Council will." "The High Council did not witness what we just saw," Vexar cut him off. "This technology threatens the entire Dominion. They must be informed immediately." As the massive Dreadnought's engines powered up for the dimensional jump that would allow it to escape, Nemesis fired one final weapon. This wasn't the causality lance that had disassembled the other Krell ships. Instead, a pulse of energy, visible only as a slight distortion in space, struck the Dreadnought's drive section. Alarms blared across the Krell vessel as engineers reported in panic. "The quantum fold drive has been locked, Supreme Commander. The field stabilizers are functioning perfectly, but the drive cannot initiate a fold. It's as if the underlying quantum states are refusing to shift." Vexar understood then. This human ship wasn't just altering physical probability. It was manipulating quantum reality itself. The implications were staggering and terrifying. "All remaining vessels, concentrate fire on that ship," he commanded, abandoning the complex tactical formations that were the pride of Krell military doctrine. "Destroy it at all costs." The remaining Krell vessels unleashed everything they had. Energy lances, graviton torpedoes, and kinetic impactors converged on Nemesis from multiple vectors. It was enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten slag. Lyanna felt the onslaught through Nemesis' sensors. The probability drive could not make the ship completely invulnerable. The laws of physics could be bent, but not entirely broken. Avoiding every single attack vector became mathematically impossible as their number increased. Diverting power to structural probability fields, she thought, and the ship responded. The outermost layer of Nemesis's hull began to shimmer as quantum states fluctuated. When the Krell weapons struck, they encountered matter that had a high probability of not being where it appeared to be. Energy weapons passed through seemingly solid hull plates. Kinetic impactors encountered resistance that wasn't physically present. Not everything could be avoided. A graviton torpedo detonated near Nemesis' port section, its gravity warping explosion powerful enough to affect probability itself. Lyanna grunted in pain as feedback from the neural interface surged through her mind. Damage reports flooded her consciousness. Power fluctuations, a section of probability field generators offline, secondary systems failing. Nemesis to Arcturus Station. She managed to transmit. "What's your evacuation status?" 82% complete. Alina replied. "We need just a few more minutes." Lyanna assessed the situation. Nemesis could still fight, but the probability drive was showing signs of instability. Dr. Novak had been right. The ship wasn't fully ready for combat. Pushing it further risked catastrophic failure. Making a decision, Lyanna directed Nemesis toward the Krell Dreadnought one final time. "I'll give you those minutes, Commander. Get your people to safety." With the ship's remaining power, she focused the causality lance on the Dreadnought's command section. The beam struck with surgical precision, not to destroy the ship entirely, but to specifically target its bridge. Inside the Krell vessel, Vexar had only a moment to register what was happening before the probability of his continued existence dropped to near zero. The command bridge dissolved around him, officers and equipment alike reducing to their component particles. Without leadership, the Krell attack faltered. Some ships continued to fire, but their coordination was gone. Others began to withdraw, recognizing that the tide of battle had turned irrevocably against them. On Arcturus Station, Alina received the report she had been waiting for. "Evacuation complete, Commander. All civilians are secured in the underground shelters." "Captain Okafor," Alina transmitted. "The evacuation is complete. I don't know how to thank you." Nemesis was visibly damaged now, with sections of its hull flickering in and out of normal space as the probability fields fluctuated. "No thanks necessary, Commander. This is what Nemesis was built for." With the immediate threat neutralized, Lyanna piloted the damaged vessel away from the battlefield, preparing to activate the probability drive for the return journey to Earth. Before departing, she sent one final message to Arcturus Station, and through them, to all of humanity. "The Krell Dominion now knows that humanity is not defenseless. We have technology they cannot counter and do not understand. This victory at Arcturus is just the beginning." As Nemesis disappeared in a ripple of quantum distortion, Alina Rice stood on the damaged bridge of Arcturus Station, looking out at the debris field that had once been a Krell invasion fleet. For the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to feel something long forgotten: hope. 3 weeks later, in the secure conference room beneath the UEF headquarters in Geneva, Admiral Wade addressed the assembled military and political leaders. "Project Nemesis has proven successful beyond our expectations," he reported. "The engagement at Arcturus resulted in the destruction of 39 Krell vessels, including a command dreadnought, with minimal damage to our prototype." "And Captain Okafor?" asked the UEF president. "Recovering well. The neural feedback from the damage sustained was significant, but our medical team reports she'll be fit to pilot again within the month. More importantly, Dr. Novak and her team have used the combat data to refine the probability drive. The fluctuations have been reduced by 70%. A general leaned forward. "How soon until we can deploy more of these vessels?" Wei exchanged glances with Dr. Novak, who stood beside a holographic display showing Nemesis' schematics. "That's the challenge, General. The quantum technologies that power Nemesis are extraordinarily difficult to replicate. Each probability drive requires materials so rare that we've had to develop new mining techniques just to extract them. And the neural interface must be customized to each pilot's unique brainwave patterns, Only one in approximately 50,000 humans has the neurological compatibility to operate it. But we are constructing more, Dr. Novak added. 3 additional vessels are already under development. We estimate they'll be operational within 6 months. The UEF president nodded thoughtfully. And the Krell? What's their response been to Arcturus? They've withdrawn from 3 contested systems, White replied. Our intelligence suggests they're reassessing their strategy. For the first time, they're facing a technology they don't understand and can't easily counter. So we've bought ourselves time, the president concluded. More than that, White corrected. We've changed the fundamental equation of this war. Before Nemesis, we were fighting for survival. Now, we're fighting for victory. As the meeting concluded, Wei found himself alone with Dr. Novak before the holographic display of Nemesis. You know, he said quietly, when we started this project 5 years ago, many thought it was impossible. Manipulating quantum probability on a macroscopic scale, harnessing dark energy for propulsion, it violated every known law of physics. Novak smiled slightly. That's always been humanity's greatest strength, hasn't it? We see the impossible not as a barrier, but as a challenge. We nodded, watching as the hologram showed Nemesis regenerating its damaged sections, probability fields stabilizing as the ship prepared for its next deployment. The Krell thought they understood us. A young, technologically inferior species, easy to conquer like so many others before. They never considered that we might approach problems differently than they do. They'll adapt, Novak warned. They always do. Of course, Wei agreed. But so will we. And now they know what we've always known about ourselves. What's that? Wei watched as the hologram of Nemesis completed its repairs, its systems glowing with renewed energy. That when humanity's back is against the wall, that's when we're most dangerous. In the vast expanse of space, a new balance of power had emerged. The Krell Dominion, accustomed to easy conquest, now faced an enemy with technology they couldn't comprehend. And humanity, long on the defensive, had found its greatest weapon, not just in the incredible technology of Nemesis, but in the ingenuity and determination that had created it. The battlefield had indeed gone silent when humanity's warship made its entrance. But the silence wouldn't last. A new chapter in the war had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again.